I, the Supreme Overlord, start by enslaving the Zerg Queen. Master, this is my coming-of-age gift to you, a beautiful maiden seasoned in the black market. I know your tastes. So she's untouched, and I've administered an aphrodisiac into her body. You can enjoy her in any way you please. In the gloomy training room, the old butler closed the door, leaving a bewildered Charles alone with the stunning maiden kneeling beside him. Catherine knew who she was going to serve when she heard the sound of the door, closing therefore. She proactively disrobed, revealing her voluptuous, scorned breasts and delicate, pink labia. She slowly approached her master, directly kneeling in front of him when she reached him, declaring, "Please, master, take Catherine's virginity. Please grace my womb with your precious essence." Perhaps it was because of the lascivious woman's loud moaning that Charles gradually snapped out of his daze, his face full of complex emotions. Reborn into a time where globally, no one had reincarnated into the continent of Overlord. The outside was still rich with the chirping of birds and blooming flora, absent of those damned dark creatures. After tonight, all of mankind will have reincarnated into the continent of Overlord, becoming overlords. Some were reincarnated into epic beings like dragons, while others turned into entities such as slimes or goblins. There were even those so unfortunate that they became mere weeds, obliterated by a merely passing herd of horses. But that's not all. Critically, there exists a race in the continent of Overlord known as the Dark Creatures. They possess repugnant forms, ruthlessly ravaging the entire continent of Overlord, and impatiently waiting for his attention. The enchanting woman before him is no other than his own personal mature gift, arranged for him by his loyal butler upon learning he had reached the age of 18. A gorgeous slave with an ample bosom, narrow waist, and sizable rear. Her name is Catherine. She is specifically there to take care of his personal needs, serving as his physical companion when necessary. Right now, it is the first night he, as her master, will take her innocence. Having pondered on the cause and effect, Charles is trying to understand the period in which he finds himself. That is, the eve of the world's transition into the continent of Overlord. In his previous life, the day after he had been intimate with Catherine, he entered the continent of Overlord in a haze. "Master, I'm here to kiss your big dick, and later you can enjoy my vagina and anus to your heart's content." Catherine smiled seductively and took off Charles's pants, putting his 20-centimeter-long big dick into her mouth. It 12 perhaps because it was her first time as well, it felt a bit dry. Charles snapped back to reality, shifting his attention back to his little female slave. One look, her face flushed with anticipation, pleading for his favor. Glancing around his chamber, spotting some entertaining tools, elicited a grin from Charles. However, it looked rather wicked. "Hi? My stupid slave, the way you lick dick is really lascivious. Wait for your master to find some interesting toys for you, and tonight I will fuck you hardly." To a man reborn and having experienced desperation, women indeed make for an excellent release. Catherine, who was having oral sex, could only let the sacred dick pull out of her mouth, ignoring the lewd water left on her labia, and knelt down again with a lascivious expression. While tending to his needs, a slave must kneel before her master. This night, she will be stripped of all rights, dignity included. Soon enough, Charles returned, now with additional small toys: whip, ropes, dog paw guards, blindfold. Observing these playful tools, Catherine's body subtly trembled, seemingly grasping the lewd future that awaited her. "Slut, crawl over here on your hands and knees." Seeing the female slave rooted to the spot, Charles furrowed his brow, impatiently demanding. Upon hearing the order, Catherine abandons all reasoning, instinctively crawling over like a dog, dutifully adorning all the props her master handed her. After a while, Charles patted Catherine's buttocks on the bed, commanding, "Foolish slave, thrust out your buttocks yourself. Tonight your master will fuck your other hole." Upon hearing this, Catherine's delicate body trembled. She obediently stuck her buttocks out, exposing herself while letting her upper body relax further, making it much more comfortable for her master to enter her from behind. When all was ready, Charles started disciplining his little mare with the whip in his hand. 2 hours later, Catherine, covered in stuff that is evidence of their pleasure, lay sprawled on the bed, barely able to breathe. It was hard to say what she had been through in the past 2 hours. 3 Charles looked at his still soft big dick, his eyes showing satisfaction. He couldn't deny that women can serve to relieve stress and boost confidence in certain ways, just as now. Previously, Charles didn't think he had the opportunity to fuck the goddess of life. Now that he's satisfied with fuck, he feels like he can do anything, and even wants to fuck his wife in front of her husband, the god of destruction. One afterward, he began to conserve energy, waiting for the possibility of the grand shift into the continent of Overlord. As for why not preparing more? The whole world was just hours away from the continent of Overlord. In this short period, not even a financial conglomerate could assemble their resources, let alone make any significant moves. Besides, nothing but humans could be brought to Blue Star. So, he chose to have quite a romp, to be in the best shape for the coming events. Two, perhaps because of their intimacy, Charles, while examining Catherine's sight of pleasure, seemed lost. "Your name is Catherine, isn't it? You were sold on the black market and nearly lost your life to me. Do you feel resentful? After all, a girl as young as her may crave for a silly love affair. Of course, it's too late for that now." Catherine, who was convulsing from being fucked, shook her head slightly upon hearing this. She looked at Charles with a face full of faith and said feverishly, "What are you joking about, master? It's you who made me experience such satisfying sex, that suffocating feeling."
"Oh my God! I wish to dedicate my life to you."
Ding! A female committing complete loyalty to the host has been detected. Zerg clan system binding successful. Novice gift pack dispatched. Host, do you wish to open it? 3 Charles was quite moved but then became perplexed. He looked around suspiciously but didn't see anything or anyone that could be talking to him. Isn't this thing only appearing in novels when I fuck a slut and activate the system? Unfortunately, in his previous life, he was fond of novels, which often featured these impressively powerful systems. Open! Considering the continent of Overlord, a place he fancied as hell, looming after this evening, Charles decided to try and make a deal with the devil. Otherwise, even with the advantage of his rebirth, he didn't have complete confidence in surviving those damned dark creatures. Ding! Congratulations, host. On the receipt of 1 Zerg clan hive and 1 Zerg queen, matriarch queen can directly descend or can be transformed through a designated individual by the host. Picar note: matriarch queen directly descended lacks wisdom and can only rely on instinct. The designated individual must have 100% loyalty to the host, or there may be a risk of loss of control. 2-2 even without knowing the might of the Zerg clan, Charles can guess the importance of the Zerg queen. Given the choices by the system, there must be pros and cons. Lacking wisdom and relying only on instinct, isn't that a fool? As for having wisdom but being susceptible to betrayal, Charles turned his gaze to Catherine, who was lying paralyzed on the bed and still emitting semen outside. The system had previously mentioned that this provocative little slave was entirely devoted to him. Isn't this an intelligent, loyal matriarch queen at his disposal? However, there was one problem. Charles, his brow furrowed, asked, "If I transform her into a matriarch queen, won't she be separated from me when we enter the continent of Overlord?" Quickly, a satisfactory answer followed. Ding! Once the host chooses a designated individual to become the matriarch queen, the system will assimilate her into the system's space until she is released after entering the continent of Overlord. The mark of her previous master will also be consequently erased, and she will exist as a vassal of the host. Hika still, demonstrating his humanity, Charles asked one more question. "Slave, if you were offered the chance to accompany your master on a worldly conquest, would you agree or not?" "My dear master, my life belongs to you. Although I only wish to satisfy my master's desires, I am equally willing to fight for my master." Catherine's face flushed with excitement, seemingly already picturing the thought of battling for her master while also satisfying him physically. Charles smiled mildly, quite pleased with her response. For he gently instructed the system, proceed with transforming Catherine. The next second, a murky light engulfed Catherine, and she vanished. Staring at the bed still wet with their shared passion, Charles paused. He promptly asked, "System, where did you send my lascivious slave?" Ding! Catherine's biological transformation will be completed in 3 hours and 59 minutes. She is currently in the system space. Host can check her status. Sick Charles nodded at the system's reply and saw his dim-witted slave enveloped in a white cocoon. She seemed to be undergoing the biological transformation. One returning to reality, he immediately crafted a survival manual for the continent of Overlord and sent it to his old butler. The intention was for the butler to distribute the guide to the rest of the staff. Charles had considered releasing this survival guide on the internet or utilizing his family fortune to promote it as much as possible. But he later thought through. Who would believe it? Living peacefully in society, if a survival manual suddenly appeared, people would certainly see it as a preface to a new video game release. It would be better, he decided, to distribute it among his loyal subjects first, taking note of their reactions. There were periods after entering the continent of Overlord when one could return to the real world, though by then, Blue Star would have transformed into the front line against the dark creatures. A knock at the door disturbed his thoughts. It was his old butler speaking in a somewhat perplexed tone. "Mr. Charles, I have distributed the survival guide as you instructed," but the recipients all seemed quite baffled. Charles shook his head at these words, first donning his noble attire before opening the door. Seeing his butler, who stood even taller than him, he spoke gently. "Peter, you should trust me. Memorize it." "Yes, Mr. Charles, I read and committed your survival guide to memory before I came here," responded the butler, nodding his head benevolently. His faith in Charles was unconditional. "That's good." Charles nodded in return, sharing certain aspects of the continent of Overlord, in a bid to ensure Peter's survival. Truth be told, having experienced a lifetime, Charles was largely indifferent towards the fate of others in the castle, with the exception of the old butler who has taken care of him over the years. Even when entering the continent of Overlord, he wished Peter not to disappear, as he had in his previous lifetime. No one would appreciate such a tragic ending, for in the end, the old butler opted to clean up the role-playing room. As he was about to tidy up the gags and ropes, Charles interjected. "Hey, Peter, leave those things be. Also, collect a few sets of those maid, stewardess, and jumpsuit costumes and store them here." In fact, being intimate with women, even in the continent of Overlord, was a pleasurable pastime. Thinking of Catherine and her enticing allure almost being overwhelmed by his desires, Charles displayed a wicked smile. "Yes, Mr. Charles, I'll take care of it." Peter accepted obediently. The continent of Overlord was vast, with each forest or desert approximately the size of a state encountered in his past life, and these were merely one region of many. Number 438, the continent of Overlord. The morning dewdrops fell on Charles' face, stirring him from his slumber. A faint transcendent energy reaction made Charles instantly awake. He had arrived at the continent of Overlord. Rubbing his head, Charles confirmed that he must have been put into a hypnotic state before entering the continent of Overlord, or else he would not have slept so heavily. "Well, since you are here, you might as well make the best of it." He quickly stood up to locate his civilization's heart of the Overlord and the parchment. These items were essential for survival in the continent of Overlord and formed the basis of every Overlord's existence. These two things usually won't be far apart, so Charles only searched around within a radius of 100 meters. Indeed, he found a bronze token and a piece of parchment on a natural stone platform. This was the bronze heart of the Overlord and the code of the Overlord's world. "Hey ding!" Heart of the Overlord detected. Does host want to merge the Zerg clan system with the heart of the Overlord? Hain noti after this fusion. The host will no longer be any regular species upon activating the heart of the Overlord, but the supreme existence of the Zerg clan, the Overlord of the Zerg clan. At first, Charles may have hesitated, but upon seeing the term, Overlord of the Zerg clan, he was completely hooked. A unique hidden species, a regal career named Overlord. If he declined this, he would kick himself for his stupidity. He hastens to call out in his mind, "Agree to merge!" The next second, the bronze token exuded a black light and quickly entered his body. Please choose the location of the Zerg clan's nest. From then on, the nest will be the heart of the Overlord. That is to say, the nest could be upgraded with materials from the Dark World and so on, which would allow continuous iterations of creature generation. Without hesitation, Charles chose this forest. In line with his understanding of the Zerg clan, such a large-scale group would need an ample amount of resources, and this forest was perfectly suited. Suddenly, a nearly 100-meter large Zerg clan nest appeared in Charles' view. The sticky and dark mycelium mat was directly at his feet. Now, Charles could summon the panel in the continent of Overlord. Her occupation Overlord of the Zerg clan, Hum Combat Power First Class Upper, Fert Skills Heart of the Swarm Eye of the Data. In the continent of Overlord, the Overlord's level is actually the level of the Heart of the Overlord, ranked as Bronze, Silver, Gold, Diamond, Hero, King, and Emperor. The higher the Heart of the Overlord level, the stronger the group boost and to some extent represents the clan's allegiance. To upgrade the Heart of the Overlord requires an enormous accumulation of resources and is certainly a massive undertaking. As for combat power, it is categorized from non-entry, first class, so on and so forth, until after the 12th level, which is demigod. Each rank is divided into upper, intermediate, and lower classes to differentiate strength within the same rank. Charles clouded over the latter part. All he knew was that in his previous life, he was merely a golden overlord serpent person with a strength of only 6 ranks. Charles turned his attention to the Heart of the Swarm. The Eye of the Data is a data panel ability all overlords possess, and Heart of the Swarm was presumably his hidden job, specific ability. A Heart of the Swarm's overlord's will is the Zerg clan's will. The overlord can mobilize all Zerg clan for combat. P1 looking at the introduction, Charles took a deep breath. This was a godlike skill. With this, he need not worry about the loyalty of his subordinates. From top to bottom united as one, this was absolutely against the universe's laws. Once he had a good understanding, Charles chose to call out his Zerg Queen Catherine, who had now completed her biological transformation in full. System. Bring Catherine out from the system space. After this, he intended to read the Continent of Overlord Newcomer Guide alongside his little submissive. In the next second, a stunning blonde lady appeared right before him. Charles swallowed hard. She hadn't been this gorgeous last night. Now there was a beautiful tail and antenna. Could this be the result of the Zerg Queen's biological transformation? Her delicate features were already exquisite, without a hint of roughness. And her wheat-colored skin had become incredibly fair. It seemed that water would squeeze out with a gentle pinch. Swishing that tail and the antennae on her forehead suddenly aroused Charles's sexual desire. Catherine slowly opened her eyes, seeming to sense something. She raised her eyes to her master's heated desire. Oh my God, master is in the mood again. With that, she began to naturally remove her clothing, crawling like a dog to Charles's side, her face showing a begging expression for her master to fuck her. Master, do you need to use your... However, Charles resisted his inner desires and kicked her with his foot lightly. Listen, Catherine, we don't have time for this right now. Your body has been transformed by me into a biological weapon. From now on you will battle along with me on this continent of Overlord. This piece of parchment is where the rules lie. I hope you can put away your lascivious appearance and read with me. Catherine looked startled at his words, also noticing the difference in herself with the outside world. If it were before, she would certainly be scared. But now, she was filled with fervor. She dressed up, sincerely came to Charles's side. Master, as I mentioned before, although I prefer to be fucked to death by my master in bed, I am also willing to fight for my master. Charles cracked a satisfied smile at Catherine's reaction, his tone softening. Don't worry, Catherine. I will keep us both alive and fuck you every day. Well, what to do when your female subordinate harbors such immense desire? So, they began reading the parchment together. The first page held only a few lines. Welcome to the world of the overlords where everyone is equal, and we're back at a new beginning. Here are some rules that newbies need to remember. 1. Newbies enjoy 5 days of protection to explore the mysteries of the continent of Overlord. 2. Heart of the Overlord is your vitals. If it gets destroyed or taken by others, you will change from being a ruler to the ruled. 3. Never venture out after dark. Those things won't care if you're a newbie. Death is very real here! These words were way too familiar for Charles. He held Catherine in his arms, comfortably playing with her. Little slut, these are the rules of the Overlord's world. Take a look, we are going to survive here for a long time. As a former Overlord, Catherine was now all but a transformed biological weapon. This was all but equivalent to her Heart of the Overlord being taken away. However, she could still view the parchment. While offering herself, Catherine laughed seductively and asked, "Don't worry, Master. I've already memorized these. So, are we going to explore now?" Although they possess a complete gene bank of the Zerg, they lack the corresponding genetic combinations to accomplish the transformation process. With only one Zerg clan and one Zerg queen, how can it be considered a Zerg apocalypse? Charles shook his head slightly. Not in a hurry, Catherine. Let's check out those who have also activated their Heart of the Overlord. Saying so, he flipped to the second page of the parchment. This was the place for the overlords to communicate and trade. They were divided into regional channels, server channels, and world channels, considering the many reincarnations from Blue Star. The regional channel was for communication within the boundaries of this primal forest, with no people for now. The server channel was for those who came to the continent of Overlord. And the world channel was for all the reincarnated overlords from Blue Star. Currently, the servers were nearly empty, or if there were people, they were just too cautious to speak out. Charles understood that everyone had just entered the world of the overlords and was still unsure about the rules of the game. Of course, more people died on the journey to find the Heart of the Overlord. Not everyone knew that the Heart of the Overlord was always very close by. He shrugged, patting Catherine's smooth face. "All right, my slave. Looks like our friends haven't got their tickets yet. There's 5 hours left until nightfall. We can go explore." And Catherine, laying like a kitten under his touch, prepared to follow him into the forest upon hearing his words. As he took a step, Charles handed Catherine an eye of the data, revealing a list of her attributes. A battle power upper first rank key skills information network, spawning, Iron Blade, Queen's Clone. Wow! Check out what I've found. Charles thoughtfully looked at Catherine's beautifully exquisite face, finding it hard to imagine such a girl giving birth to the Zerg clan. It seemed a bit of a waste of natural beauty. Then he looked at other skill introductions and sighed in relief. K Information Network. As the matriarch queen of all Zerg clans, she can exchange information and convey the overlord's instructions through the antennae on her forehead, and to some extent can arrange the Zerg clan's troops. Spawning. The stolen genes and nutrients from mycelium mat are seized by the matriarch queen and used with a special programming technique to quickly mass-produce Zerg clan units. Iron Blade. Swords hard enough to carve through metal can be freely extended and retracted from the hands, and their hardness can be increased by eating metal. Queen's Clone can sacrifice half of her power to divide into a human or Zerg clan form to substitute the master in spawning fights. Spawning programming efficiency remains the same, but power will be reduced to about 1/3. Master, what's wrong? Catherine blinked, somewhat puzzled. Charles scratched his head and said irritably, "You fool! Don't you realize that you've grown powerful?" Hearing this, Catherine only then noticed the changes in herself. The feeling of immense power was quite captivating for her, who used to be so weak. Hearing her master's words, she quickly understood her strength and skills were all gifts from him. She grinned. I see, Master. So, shall we go exploring outside? I can't wait to wage war for you." All right, since she insisted, Charles started exploring the outside world with Catherine. The Zerg clan warriors needed resources to spawn. In a complete Zerg clan civilization, naturally, there will be division of labor, and the aim of this exploration was to randomly find some creatures and seize everything they had to first spawn worker bees. Only then could they start mining the surrounding wood and mineral matter for mass spawning of soldiers. Compared with others' cautiousness, Charles was evidently much more relaxed. Well, it's only the first day. He and his mate have already stepped beyond the first phase and into the transcendent ranks. It's still okay to be a bit naughty in the current newbie village. Look there, Catherine. There's a little guy all alone. When they reached a river, Charles patted Catherine's shoulder, cheerfully pointing at the two-headed wolf pup drinking water. A two-headed ferocious wolf, battle power lower first rank of skills, double head bite, fire spit, a lower first rank two-headed wolf. In the past, Charles would have run at the sight, but not now. Catherine, seeing the wolf, got excited. "Master, I will seize everything from it for you." Through her biological instincts, she easily assessed the strength of the two-headed wolf and realized she could effortlessly overpower it. After all, even within the first tier, there are distinctions of strength. Reaching the first tier does not mean all beings are equal. Being a higher-class Zerg queen, this kind of mixed breed was no threat to her at all. Charles nodded slowly. Go ahead, killing it doesn't matter. After all, we only need its body. A queen who just received power might not be able to control her strength properly. This needed practice. After all, besides being an Zerg queen, Catherine is also his silly female slave. It won't be fun if she didn't know her strength while serving him. Catherine's eyes were filled with intense killing desire when she got permission. In a flash, she was next to the two-headed wolf. Her twin blades glinted scarily, like they were reflecting the image of two wolf heads. At the beast's roar, the two-headed ferocious wolf looked at the terrifying creature before it warily. Its simple mind couldn't comprehend what was happening. It only knew that the creature standing on two legs before it was powerful and it stood no chance of winning. Seeing the snarling wolf pup, Catherine wasted no words and swiftly closed in on it. In just 2 seconds, both wolf heads were lopped off, their blood splattering on her enchanting face. Her smile was beautiful yet crazed. However, shortly after, a hefty nut fell on her head, making Catherine's face turn dazed and puzzlingly adorable. Charles was the one who acted. With a somewhat helpless expression, he took a towel from the system space and helped his foolish female slave clean up the blood. You really are a stupid girl. Not dodging when the blood splatters, even laughing here. In the world of the Overlord, all darkness is magnified, especially sexual desire and the urge to kill. Catherine is his exclusive outlet for his sexual desire. She can't imitate those lunatics who only know to kill. Knowing her state was off, she quickly bowed her head to indicate her mistake. Charles couldn't help but pat her on the head to comfort her. Then he started the cleanup process. In the continent of Overlord, killing a rank monster would drop a treasure box. Looking at the softened corpse on the ground, a few changes appeared in the eye of the data before Charles. Open, said Charles, using his conscious mind to drive the eye of the data, to perform a systematic collection. This is an exclusive feature between the Overlords. Whoever makes the first kill opens it. And since Catherine is now his mate, the right to open the treasure box naturally belongs to him. Congratulations to the Overlord for obtaining a skill book, Nature's Drizzle. Looking at the green skill book lying in the system space, Charles couldn't help but nod his head in satisfaction. Perhaps because it's the early phase of entering the continent of Overlord, the drop rate when killing these small bosses is quite good. Nature's Drizzle is a unique skill of the elf race, not of low tier, and could be exchanged for some natural timber. Catherine, use your Zerg clan information database to scan this two-headed ferocious wolf to unlock the Zerg clan template and the resources needed. Charles mused for a moment and said, the main reason for this exploration is the need to spawn soldiers. The basis for spawning soldiers comes from a key Zerg clan unit, the Worker Bee. These creatures can greatly improve the efficiency of mining and can quickly form a scale like an assembly line. You should know that even as Worker Bees of the Zerg clan, their combat power is comparable to those of the high-grade unranked warriors. Catherine nodded, with the Queen's blade as the media. She quickly extracted the genes within. She was surprised to find that her database actually returned feedback like this. Catherine said earnestly, Master, due to the special nature of this region, the Zerg clan database also needs to be updated. The Zerg clan units we can manufacture on an assembly line now include Hydralisk and Worker Bees. For Hydralisk, we still need to find some snake-like monsters for transformation. Any creature can be used for the Worker Bees. The energy unit of this two-headed wolf in front of us is enough to produce 10 Worker Bees. Oh, when these Zerg clan units are truly built, they may be stronger than those in the database. That's why data needs to be updated. Hearing Catherine's statement, Charles nodded and said, All right, when we get back, you can first use a Queen's clone to produce 10 Worker Bees. The first monster siege of tonight is about to begin. The Worker Bee, when activated, is a snowballing weapon. One could say without the laborious mining of Worker Bees, there wouldn't be the infinite spawning of the Zerg clan disaster. Catherine nodded, then curiously asked, Master, why do you want me to split into a matriarch queen clone? Although we're efficient in terms of skills, I'm still better at specific micromanagement. Just as she asked, Charles forcefully pinched her nipple, saying harshly, "You are my foolish woman. Even for spawning, it can only be through human childbirth, Catherine. You're not a birthing tool." Having his woman give birth to Zerg clan offspring, even if it was just coding, made Charles sick to his stomach. Fortunately, there was the matriarch queen clone skill, otherwise he might have stumbled on this step a bit longer. Upon hearing Charles' words, a touch of emotion filled Catherine's eyes. Not a birthing tool, huh? She was captured and taken to the black market as soon as she came of age, trained by the queens there in hopes of fetching a good price. She thought even though she was bought by a handsome master like this, her fate would be to be used until boredom and then be forgotten or awarded to a subordinate. Who would have thought that the master would turn out to be surprisingly innocent? Even though this sort of innocence is a little overbearing, her eyes were filled with adoration, instantly bringing life into the slightly deathly atmosphere. Maybe it's also nice being the master's foolish girl. Yes, my master. From now on, all Zerg clan manufacturing will be handled by the matriarch queen clone. Well, allow me to explain. This egg-laying ability doesn't involve my body directly producing the eggs. Instead, it uses my programming knowledge to edit genes, and then the eggs are laid systematically on the mycelium mat, much like an assembly line. It was then that Catherine knew her master was a very gentle person, even though he always cursed her as a naughty girl. All right, she admitted it herself. One by one, the large-faced white larvae lay neatly on the mycelium mat, absorbing the remaining energy of the wolf's body. Not more, not less, exactly 10. Charles curiously poked them and found that a little guy had broken the shell and exposed his ferocious mouthparts. He patted Catherine next to him and laughed. "These little guys look so cute, don't you think, silly girl?" Upon hearing this, Catherine also responded with a smile, "Yes, my master. They are very cute." In the overlord and matriarch queen's eyes, the ferocious larvae were like the most beautiful babies, their aesthetics stretched to the limit by the bloodline. It wasn't long before all the Zerg clan worker bees had hatched and completely consumed the wolf's nutrients, reducing it to stark white bones. In the end, even the bones were eaten by the starving worker bees, serving as their final meal to consolidate their strength. Charles looked at the worker bees one by one, each full of violent momentum, as an eye of the data swept over them. Battle power, lower first rank, skills, magic claw, mining magic, lower first rank, 10 lower first ranks! Charles couldn't help but smile. When in his past life did he achieve lower first rank? It was about a week later, wasn't it? But now, even the smallest soldiers start at the first rank. If the dark red falls, it would be truly chaotic. But the magic claw is quite interesting. He just checked. Only 2 worker bees have this skill. The others have just regular iron claw. He pointed to one of the worker bees. "Show me your magic claw." The worker bee paused for a moment, and once it understood the overlord's meaning, it started to use its skill quickly. There was a faint red imprint on its claw. When it struck the big tree, it left a shallow cut mark. The mark showed faint signs of burn. Charles turned around, asking curiously, "This skill, can it be innately injected into our genes?" The overlord has never been technical, this he knows all too well. Catherine's eyes lit up, then she said somewhat helplessly, "Master, if you're talking about coding our genes, I can, but reorganizing the gene blocks of the soldiers, I'm afraid my computational capacity isn't sufficient yet." "Oh, unless I upgrade to the 2nd rank, I can record magic as an attribute and install it in the soldiers. And even then, it requires special magic monsters like the 2-headed wolf as a supply source. Law of conservation of energy, that makes sense." In the end, Catherine began to research coding recombination, the worker bees began to mine minerals, and Charles returned to studying the parchment. Only 4 hours left until dark now, and those overlords should be coming in. Indeed, as soon as he entered, he was overwhelmed by the flurry of messages. "Han I Dethan 450 haha, my fate race is a troll. The strongest existence in the unranked starting point. ID 9450 and I turned into a clump of grass, and a tiger just pooped on my head. Who's gonna rescue me? Oh, 4 how ID 33046A. Coordinates, I'm a schoolgirl. As long as someone comes to save me, I'll give you a private chat and take a look at my pink labia." Heen 7 Charles scrolled through, carefully investigating the general information. Just like in his past life, everyone started with ordinary races, with only a few lucky individuals awakening rare races. As for his overlord of the Zerg clan, that was even less likely. Or rather, even if there were, they wouldn't mention it here, as this is the channel for the same forest. Can I de-wincing? Some exploratory information here. In about 3 hours, it will get dark, and during the night some terrifying creatures will attack everyone's heart of the overlord. P-Hun ID1C. The best way is to actively explore and gain power to combat them. P. After speaking, he closed the parchment and began to wait for the arrival of nightfall. After all, he is also a human. It's okay to satisfy his hero dreams by sharing some information that does not involve benefits. Apart from that, the main aim is to improve goodwill. When everyone grows and can afford his goods, he would exchange some worthless rare items for huge resources and reap a harvest. 4 hours later, animal roars began outside the hive. Charles woke up from his light sleep, a glint in his eyes. The first wave of monster attacks has arrived. Deep within the forest, the serene environment was finally shattered, as countless terrifying roars of beasts echoed incessantly. Monsters with eyes gleaming green surged toward the Zerg nest in unison, intent on destroying the heart of the overlord and annihilating all life within. Coincidentally, a certain Zerg overlord had a similar thought. Since arriving here, Charles had never seen such a rudimentary monster template. Clearly, these creatures were designed for beginner levels. Standing beside him, Catherine's eyes, once filled with lust, now brimmed with naked killing intent. Master, should you need me to clean up the battlefield? Gazing at the grotesque black sludge monsters, Charles shook his head disdainfully. Foolish slave, these creatures aren't worth your effort. Leave them to the worker bees. 320 unranked pylorus beasts would be a stroke of bad luck for an ordinary lord. But Charles was no longer that minor lord with a few small naga. He was now the Zerg overlord. A single worker bee could decimate them all. Catherine nodded slightly, though she was a bit disappointed that she wouldn't get to unleash her full destructive potential. Nevertheless, she found greater satisfaction in staying by her master's side. Hence, she commanded the worker bees to commence their slaughter. At that moment, the pylorus beasts, still unaware of the daunting force they were up against, edged closer and closer to the encircling worker bees. One of the pylorus beasts stepped on a tree branch, producing a crisp snap, a sound that sealed their fate with no chance of escape. Suddenly, 10 grotesque insects, each over a meter long, emerged from various angles, closing in on the pylorus beasts and brandishing their chilling, razor-sharp blades. The pylorus beasts were utterly bewildered. They stood there trembling, too frightened to put up any resistance. All 20 of them were mercilessly slaughtered by the worker bees. Charles wasn't surprised at all. The pylorus beasts had been nicknamed timid beasts. In his previous life, even the least combative worms in the Zerg database exuded a formidable killing aura. The worker bees, who spent years mining outside, were even more intimidating. The fact that the pylorus beasts weren't scared to death was probably due to some dark enhancement. However, what puzzled Charles was that the Eye of Data showed no changes, and neither did the heart of the Overlord. This shouldn't be happening. Could there be something else yet to emerge? As if in response to his unspoken suspicions, a tremendous rumbling shook the ground, revealing a colossal gorilla. This was the true final boss of the assault, the Dark Gorilla. 1 combat power Tier 1, intermediate ace skill earth-shaking fist, a Tier 1 intermediate dark monster. His choice of location seemed ridiculously dangerous. Charles felt a twitch at the corner of his mouth. The first night was typically supposed to be relatively manageable, with no more than 5 timid pylorus beasts at most. Yet here he was, facing not just 20 of those skittish creatures, but also a tiered-up dark gorilla. Was this some kind of targeted vendetta against him? If an ordinary lord were in his place, they wouldn't stand a chance against the pylorus beasts alone, let alone contend with a dark gorilla! Despite his grumbling, Charles was actually quite pleased. The first night's monster attack served as a wake-up call for lords in this world. It was designed to remind them not to grow complacent, but to strive for strength. Defeating these creatures would not only yield treasure chests dropped by the monsters themselves, but also earn rewards from the Lord's continent, tailored to the challenge's difficulty. As a lord, his focus was solely on killing as many dark creatures as possible. And when it came to killing dark creatures, Charles had nothing to worry about. It's just a mere dark gorilla. There wasn't even any need for both him and Catherine, the hero units, to intervene. The swarm of worker bees alone could encircle it and bring it down. Indeed, that was exactly what happened. The dark gorilla made a grand entrance, but under the flawless coordination of 10 worker bees, its body began to sustain continuous damage. The dark gorilla pounded its chest a few times, its eyes glowing red with fury, and finally let out a deafening roar as it swung a powerful fist toward one of the worker bees. This single strike sent a worker bee into the Zerg exclusive critical state, but it was merely one punch. After the punch, the dark gorilla froze in place and was soon overwhelmed as the other worker bees bit into its neck, bringing its life to an end. At that precise moment, the eye of Data began to register the change. Congratulations to the Lord for killing a dark creature, earning 3 drops of dark essence. Air dark essence, an essential elixir for advancing dark type races to tier 1. Also a valuable material for enchanting dark weapons. However, the Zerg weren't a dark type race. They were pure biological weapons, so this would have to be auctioned off. Charles shook his head slightly. He hadn't expected much from this roll of the dice anyway. He was more interested in the Lord's Continent's rewards. In the next instant, the rewards arrived as anticipated. Hating congratulations to Lord No One for surviving the first night. You have been awarded a Lord-exclusive reward. Zerg Hero Medusa's synthesis formula and bloodthirsty insect gene template. Now, this was the jackpot! Charles's face lit up with excitement. The Lord's Continent's will was surprisingly generous this time. Not only had it provided a new Zerg template to fill his database, but it also included an evolution formula for a Zerg hero. What did a Zerg hero signify? These were the elites capable of fighting above their tier. As the Overlord, he couldn't afford to be always on the front lines. And while Catherine had decent combat skills, her primary role was to program Zerg genes. Overall, Zerg hero units were currently in short supply, and they urgently needed another member. Suddenly, streams of inherited memories were directly imprinted into Charles's mind, embedding all that knowledge deeply within him. Medusa formula Royal Abyssal Serpent Woman, 1 drop of dark essence, blood of the Zerg Overlord. These were the ingredients needed to create the Zerg hero Medusa. Conveniently, Charles had an ample supply of both dark essence and the blood of the Overlord. Unfortunately, the thought of the Abyssal Serpent Woman made Charles's expression sour. This place was a forest, likely an elf territory, and elves despised the lascivious serpent species from the abyss. So, the most crucial component was probably missing: a royal bloodline! Noticing her master's unease, Catherine offered her breasts for him to knead at will. Her master had once said that playing with women was a great stress reliever. As a loyal and foolish slave, she had to be proactive. Sure enough, with Catherine's ample bosom in his hands, Charles began to relax, his previous concerns dissipating. He looked at Catherine's coquettish face and just smiled. Who knew how many would perish in this beginner's trial tonight? He turned to Catherine and said, "Catherine, go collect the genetic data from those creatures. Then we'll start preparing for mass production." In the world of lords, getting stronger was always the central theme. While screwing Catherine was enjoyable, Charles was more focused on keeping them both alive so he could screw her every day. Catherine nodded and started directing the worker bees to haul the dead dark creatures back to the mycelium. The energy from these creatures was enough to produce a large batch of worker bees. In an era where even Tier 1 beings were considered elites, what would be the outcome of rapidly mass-producing Tier 1 worker bees or other Zerg units? On the soft Zerg Queen's bed, Charles started reviewing some parchment. The district channel still had over 30,000 people, meaning that nearly 20,000 had already perished in this beginner's trial. This death toll wasn't high. It was actually a very low mortality rate. It seemed that many had heeded his advice. In his previous life, because no one had this information, 40,000 out of 50,000 in the district channel had died. Our user 5990, I have to say, that number 1 really helped us a lot. If it weren't for his warnings, I might have died at the hands of those damned pylorus beasts. Haysher user 927 is I. Indeed, I was one of those who realized things a bit late, But thanks to number one's information, I survived, even though my Heart of the Overlord sustained some damage. Most of the comments were praising number one, and as the mastermind behind it all, Charles felt gratified. Whether people read his warnings or not was one thing, but judging by the reduced death rate, it had certainly made a difference. As for the skeptics, it didn't matter. After all, there was nothing more painful than dying at the hands of the pylorus beasts. Approximately half an hour later, Catherine returned to the Zerg bed, quietly settling into Charles's embrace. Softly she spoke, "Master, I have successfully extracted the genes from all the invaders. Thanks to the worker bees, our nutritional supply is quite sufficient, and we can start producing troops." Hearing this, Charles put aside the parchment and asked with a hint of excitement, "Tell me, Catherine, which types of units can we mass produce now?" As far as he knew, there were already worker bees and zerglings. However, the bloodthirsty insect required blood, attribute dark creatures, and for the moment, he couldn't find the necessary materials. Nodding earnestly, Catherine replied, "At present, we can mass-produce worker bees, zerglings, worms, and a new gene sequence I created, which I call blade bugs. The first three are in our database and familiar to you, Master. I'll explain the blade bug gene sequence. The blade bug is an enhanced version of our species, combining my queen's blade gene, rare minerals, and special monster DNA. This type of insect is akin to a patchwork creature, with its strength varying based on the materials used. This time, I estimate it to reach the upper tier of the first level, using the dark gorilla as the base. We can create 2 gorilla blade bugs. To put it simply, the original dark gorilla was only around mid-tier rank 1, but with Catherine's programming and the addition of the Queen's blade weapon, its combat capabilities were significantly enhanced. Although the weapon's power doesn't quite match the original, it still greatly boosts the blade beetle's combat potential, bringing it up to high-tier rank 1. Hearing that 2 upper-tier first-level insects would soon be at his disposal, Charles nodded in satisfaction and leaned in to kiss Catherine's delicate lips. However, Catherine dodged, not out of rebellion or shyness, but with a hint of embarrassment. She said, "Master, I've consumed a lot of your semen. I've heard that men are a bit squeamish about this. Why don't I just lick your penis? A day never passes without this lustful slave girl craving a good fuck." One Charles, helpless yet amused, tousled her hair and teased, "You say that. But every one of your 3 holes has been filled with my semen, and your body has been coated in it. What are you worried about? Once these stressful days are behind us, Master will lick your slutty pussy, and then we'll both be equally unclean." 3 After a brief moment of flirting, Catherine returned to her task of producing blade bugs and worms. For now, zerglings, which are more suited to ambushes, were not the optimal choice. The novice villages in the Lord's continent had only just begun, and lower-tier first-level worker bees sufficed as the main force. High-level combat power was represented by the 2 blade bugs, while the top-tier strength came from Charles and Catherine. Hence, infrastructure development was currently more critical. Many worker bees were still exposed to the elements because they lacked a proper hive, a situation that required the worm units to construct subterranean nests. Because Charles had previously discussed the importance of efficiency, Catherine utilized her Queen's clone technique, effectively doubling the speed at which the blade bug genes were programmed. The process of creating a blade bug from scratch took approximately 2 hours, and with the night only halfway through, Charles's plan to explore the darkness could still proceed. Indeed, on his very first day in the Lord's continent, Charles was already preparing to venture into the night. This shift in plans was entirely due to Catherine's mention of the blade bugs. With the addition of these 2 upper-tier first-level insects and the Queen's clone, the Zerg mother hive would remain secure. Combat level upper-tier first level has skills Queen's blade, imitation, earth-shattering slash. The blade bug, over 2 meters in length, was covered in corrosive fluids. On either side of its insect claws were blades identical to Catherine's Queen's blades, exuding a menacing aura. Charles nodded in satisfaction. The blade bug had indeed met his expectations. Its combat power and skills ensured it was not at the bottom of the upper-tier first-level ranks. With this formidable force safeguarding the brood nest, he felt at ease. Subsequently, he turned his attention to another species within the swarm. These were creatures deeply rooted underground, somewhat reminiscent of tentacle monsters in appearance. In truth, if fully exposed, they would closely resemble desert worms. Har combat level non-ranked hay skills, hive construction, burrow, an excellent and decisively executed skill. As for the non-ranked combat level, Charles dismissed them outright. If there ever came a time when the worm-like creatures were required to defend the hive, it would likely mean he was already on the losing end of this lordship game. Charles then commanded Catherine, share the construction blueprints for the primary Zerg nest through the information network to the worms. Instruct them to create a hive capable of housing approximately 2,000 worker bees. The worker bees were a Zerg unit that could never be too numerous. Even in the later stages, they would remain the main force in resource gathering, forming the backbone of the Zerg's agricultural base. Catherine nodded, her antenna twitching slightly. Immediately, the worms burrowed into the ground and began their work. According to Charles's plan, constructing the basic hive would take about 2 days. With these orders given, the two of them stepped into the unknown night. One while staying within one's comfort zone might keep one ahead. Possessing a spirit of exploration opens up limitless possibilities in the world of lords. Nighttime was always taboo because the suppression of dark creatures would lessen to a certain extent. The night serves as a revelry for the creatures of darkness. One yet, here came a fearless individual with a cheat-like advantage. While others were still in the novice zone, hunting low-level non-ranked monsters to gather resources and create minions, Charles had already wiped out most of the non-ranked monsters around him. There's no doubt that it was all done by the worker bees. After all, monsters are also a type of resource. Look over there, Catherine. That dark river is actually a corrosive river, inhabited by the 5 venomous toads. Charles said excitedly, pointing to a black river as they passed by. If Catherine could extract the genes of these 5 venomous toads and combine them with the Zerg, it might be possible to create a wide-range AO venomous insect. At least for now, the Lord's continent was still a world where carbon-based lifeforms prevailed, making venom a very effective attribute for wide-area destruction units. Upon hearing Charles, Catherine directed her gaze towards the dark river. Even as the Zerg queen, she felt a physiological repulsion towards the deep, filthy waters. However, it seemed logical for venomous creatures to inhabit such a place. The monster genes in the Lord's continent were superior to those in the Zerg's initial data banks. If there were truly venomous creatures here, they might compensate for the self-destructing bugs' shortcomings, transforming them into potent, venomous AoE units. But how could she coax these creatures out willingly? Tilting her head in thought, she asked, Master, I sense numerous creatures in this dark river. But the water is not only filthy but also highly toxic. How can we lure them out? Charles paused in silence for a moment before shaking his head. Using conventional methods to bomb the river won't work on the 5 venomous toads. Each one of them is cunning. Mum, let me think. There must be a way. He rubbed his head in frustration. Encountering a monster that was both manageable and useful in the dead of night was no easy feat. Suddenly, a black streak darted across the lake. Upon closer inspection, it was a large crow hunting insects. It was a non-ranked 4-eyed crow, a lower-tier monster that fed on carrion and insects. In the next moment, a crimson tongue shot out towards the crow, and Charles's eyes lit up. Catherine, one of the 5 venomous toads, has emerged. Kill it and save that 4-eyed crow. Perhaps we can use it as bait to lure out the rest of those fools. He hun combat level mid-tier first level, and skills tongue strike, venom spread toxic body, nodding in acknowledgement. Catherine moved with lightning speed. She leaped into the air, swinging her queen's blade at the crimson tongue. Unsurprisingly, the venomous tongue was severed, causing the 5 venomous toad to hop around in pain. Without losing momentum, Catherine found a foothold mid-air, stepping on the innocent 4-eyed crow. As she leaped again, she flung the crow to the shore and continued her assault on the toad. With a sound akin to a bullfrog's croak, the 5 venomous toad spewed its internal venom towards Catherine. But when it came to toxins, no creature could surpass the Zerg. The venom had no effect, and Catherine swiftly decapitated the toad with a single slash. Iding! Congratulations to the Lord for obtaining a silver treasure chest. The five-venomous toad met its end in an instant. However, the tale was far from over. Charles observed the swarms of the five venomous toads beginning to encircle his foolish slave girl and immediately understood that they had fallen for a feigned weakness. These toads, although possessing terrifying strength, had maintained an excessively low profile. Seeing Catherine caught in a standoff, Charles conjured a blade in his right hand, one that was similar to hers but uniquely designed for a Zerg overlord, the Blade of Dominion. Simultaneously, a pair of thin, enormous wings unfurled from his back, wings that only high-ranking Zerg were privileged to awaken. As a Zerg overlord, it was inconceivable that his true strength would be inferior to that of his slave girl. He had simply seen no need to intervene until now. It should be noted that while other overlords might serve merely as commanders, Charles's dominion extended beyond leadership into the realm of warfare. In a fleeting moment of distraction, his insect wings propelled him into the air. In an instant, he had wrapped his arm around Catherine's waist. With a cold, indifferent expression, he declared, "Foolish slave girl, are those wings on your back merely ornamental? Watch as your master slaughters this rabble." Indeed, she deserved to be harshly disciplined for her incompetence. At his words, Catherine stuck out her tongue, her wings fluttering gently but making no move to leave Charles's embrace. It was clear she was doing this intentionally. She gazed admiringly at her master as he plunged into the swarm of the five venomous toads, slaughtering them with the precision and grace of a deadly weapon. His elegant swordsmanship resembled a dance, leaving not a single stain upon him. This was her master Charles, a formidable Zerg overlord. The venomous toads quickly realized something was amiss upon encountering this deadly adversary. In their haste to retreat to the dark river, those nearest to its edge were the first to be cut down. Thus unfolded the absurd spectacle of the venomous toads being gradually driven away from the river's domain. By the time they reached the shore, only 3 of the original 20 toads remained. Charles waved his blade of dominion with an air of boredom and remarked, "Foolish slave girl, now it's your turn to perform. My subordinates shall harbor no weaklings." Fortunately, Charles understood that Catherine had been merely toying with them. Otherwise, he would have had to train his foolish slave girl rigorously. In the realm of the Overlord continent, combat strength was the key to survival. Upon hearing her master's command, Catherine's eyes gleamed with cruelty. The Queen's blade, her true skill, was fully unleashed, forming 2 10-meter-long blades of flesh. With a sweeping motion, she decimated all the 5 venomous toads in an instant. This was the true power of Catherine's Queen's blade skill, a technique worthy of its name. The previous blade was merely her passive ability. Charles nodded in satisfaction. This power might even challenge a second-tier adversary. From the perspective of a Zerg queen, her development was quite promising. The dark river returned to its tranquil state, and the worker bees began to drag the carcasses of the toads and crows back to serve as nourishment for the fungal mats. Meanwhile, Charles's eye of data had already registered over 20 treasure chests. Charles did not hesitate. He immediately opened all the treasure chests with a single command. A batch of mid-tier, first-level treasure chests should still be considered top-notch boss loot at this stage. Hopefully, he could get that one special item he had been looking for. Congratulations, Overlord, for obtaining the blueprint for a basic moonwell and a silver, grade heart of the Overlord. For Charles, only these 2 items were truly useful. One would allow him to complete the beginner elf set and manually create an elven forest, while the other would enable an upgrade to the heart of the Overlord, thereby increasing the power cap for both him and Catherine. As for the other items from the chests, they were a mixed bag of mostly useless things, primarily blueprints for mundane household items like filters, with a few containing magical elements. Charles kept some of these items, but they would ultimately be traded at the parchment-based trading center for resources necessary for the Zerg. Charles was already aware from his previous life that the heart of the Overlord limited the strength of the Overlord and their subordinates. This was no secret in future times. A bronze-tier heart of the Overlord could accommodate non-tier and first-tier Overlords and their subordinates, while the silver-tier heart they had obtained could support up to 3rd tier. Both Charles and Catherine were currently constrained by the heart of the Overlord. With an upgrade, they could successfully step into the second tier. Charles glanced at the parchment, checking the time. About 4 hours remained until dawn. Let's head back, Catherine. Our exploration for tonight ends here. Your master has something even more exhilarating for you to experience, he said after some thought, deciding it was better to return and sell the surplus resources before upgrading the heart of the Overlord. At his words, Catherine's eyes reddened. Were they not in the wilderness, she might have reached out to touch herself. There was no helping it. Her master's words always carried double meanings. Making herself wet would hasten her climax. In the District Exchange Forum, I ideate 200 Thea, my goblins are reproducing so rapidly that I can't sustain them anymore. Does anyone have breadfruit for trade? High prices and low hassle, sincerely seeking help. For an ID 1453, does anyone have a filter? Damn it, are you all saying your reincarnated beings don't need water, and I'm the only human here? ID 4438, this is hilarious. I'm an elven queen, but my place has 0 natural resources, just a lone sacred tree to feed me. P. Charles scanned the trade listings and found there were still very few items posted. Considering this was just after the first night, it made sense. The first wave of darkness had blessed the overlords with valuable items, unlikely to be up for trade so soon. He took a moment to glance at the extensive blueprints and resources in his system space, a slight smirk curving his lips. The time for harvest had come. When it came to blueprints, weapons, or skill books, those other folks might fall short. But minerals, they had to have plenty of those. Charles immediately dumped all his surplus items onto the trading platform, specifying a barter system to collect the resources needed for upgrading the heart of the Overlord. 300 tons of lumber, 100 tons of iron ore, and 1 upgraded heart of the Overlord. Deal sealed. Hen ID1 uploaded filter Remla, the entire exchange channel erupted into chaos. Had this big shot raided an entire horde of bosses or what? Subsequently, they followed the data stream directly to the trading center. Upon discovering that those elusive blueprints and skill books could be exchanged merely by gathering raw materials, they were utterly ecstatic! What? A Dragonfire magic skill book for just 10 tons of iron ore. I'll gather it with my subordinates right away. A filter blueprint for just 1 ton of wood. I'll gather it with my subordinates right now. 2. In this era, the Novus Lords had no shortage of time to collect basic construction materials. They worked tirelessly, 6 hours a day without rest, and now they could actually obtain magical skill books. 2. Charles quietly observed the scene unfolding before him, a smile playing on his lips. He needed these raw materials to swiftly ascend to a silver-tier overlord, while the new overlords urgently required blueprints and skills to enhance their own strength. It was a win-win situation. Just as he was reveling in the influx of materials, a private chat window suddenly popped up. To his surprise, it was from that elf girl with the ID 438. Attached at the end is a picture of an elf girl that is obviously from the internet, with the software watermark still intact. ID 438, you are so powerful. Do you have anything useful for an elf? Hive ID1, yes, I have the beginner elf empress set, including a moonwell. So, what do you have to trade? Though Charles did need an elf to obtain the Tree of Life, it was evident that the other party was trying to get something for nothing. There was no way Charles would fall for it. The other party remained silent for a long time, and after realizing that her seductive tactics wouldn't work, she finally typed out a response. Han ID 4038 said, other than my title as the Elf Queen, I have nothing else. If we are talking about a trade, all I can offer is my body as the Elf Queen and the Tree of Life. The former, even if I were to offer myself to you, you wouldn't be able to get here. The latter is my lifeline. Is there anything else you might want? For an ID 438, I do have a high-level contract, which would bind both parties to the agreement. My conditions are twofold. You cannot make me your sexual slave, and you cannot demand the Tree of Life. 1 ID 438. By the way, my name is Augustine Eve, the future queen of the elven race. Reading the series of messages from the other party, Charles raised an eyebrow. She's quite an intriguing and distinctive young woman, the queen of the elves. It seemed like a hidden class. Ordinarily, such a role should be in the elven forest. Why had this girl fallen to such a destitute state, resorting to signing contracts? Contracts were incredibly powerful tools on the continent of overlords. Moreover, a high-level contract was almost unbreakable, until one became a demigod. And Augustine Eve, wasn't that the name of his fiancée? As a member of a prominent family in the Lighthouse Nation, his family had always been in a marriage alliance with the Augustine family, a tradition that had lasted for centuries. Charles had long known from the old butler that he had a fiancée, a prodigy from the Augustine family named Eve. However, Eve had always been deep in her studies at an elite academy for noblewomen, so the two had never met. Who could have imagined that the very Eve would become the Elven Queen after arriving in this other world? Moreover, she had transformed into a pitiable figure, utterly destitute and devoid of any resources. "Ha, Charles, I can give you what you want, but I require 5 years of resource development from your elven forest, and you must pledge your loyalty to me." Keith, the other party, was silent for a long time before reluctantly agreeing. "Eve, number one, you are truly a greedy person. Peavhan Eve, but given my weakness, I have no choice but to accept. However, I also need to add some conditions. Since I am to be your vassal, I should receive a certain degree of resource allocation." Keen Eve, "I trust you understand that elves are the most noble race here, and the resources they possess are the most precious and abundant. Helping me rise to power would ensure you get half of those resources, wouldn't it?" It was a rare occasion for Charles to praise a woman's intelligence, yet his fiancée, whom he had not seen in what felt like an eternity, left him utterly astounded. Her negotiating posture, even when at a disadvantage, was focused on seeking win-win solutions to expedite her own rise. She truly embodied the qualities of a formidable woman destined to become the Elven Queen. "Ha, Charles, let's seal the contract." Queen Eve, as he spoke, the parchment suddenly began to heat up. Charles, deep in thought, gazed westward, the general direction where Eve was located. "Hading, ID 438 has sent you a contract request. Would you like to inscribe your true name here?" Seeing the golden letters, Charles unhesitatingly imprinted his true name. Immediately, the other side erupted.
Eve, Charles, fuck you!
"Eve, you're my dearly betrothed, and now you've turned your little fiancé into your exploited subordinate. We should be having intimate and physical relations." One Charles couldn't help but laugh. He wasn't surprised that his identity had been revealed. After all, signing with his true name allowed her to see it. What puzzled him was that this elegant and refined young lady, who had always been a high-class noblewoman, was now using such vulgar language. "Ha, Charles, no insults, please. Who told you to be so incompetent? Besides, we're not even close, so don't act familiar." Peen Charles, as for the engagement, I think our relationship as comrades in arms is more fitting. Don't you think, my queen? And Eve, resources. Give me resources and you'll be my daddy. Then she started cursing again. Eve, damn it, I'll screw you over someday, you bastard.
P. Charles, screw your slutty pussy! Her Charles, call me daddy and you'll get them! If Eve, daddy! Daddy!
Daddy. Charles shook his head with amusement. He could hardly believe that his elegant fiancée, the demi-goddess empress of his past life, had turned into this. He also hadn't expected that what started as a straightforward transaction would turn into such flirtatious banter. To his surprise, after Eve realized he was her fiancé, she even sent him selfies of her real long legs and slender waist. "Eve here, jerk off with these," Charles cursed under his breath, feeling oddly relieved. In the end, he sent all the resources he had promised to the elves, even a bit more than originally agreed upon. Knowing that the other party was Eve, their relationship had now evolved from a mere contract to a family entanglement. Both knew that sooner or later, they would have to face each other intimately. The only question was, who would dominate and who would submit? In a clean corner of the forest by a lake, Eve stared gloomily at the oppressive terms in her hand. Thinking about that guy's aloof demeanor made her stomach churn. She muttered, "Charles, you stupid asshole, even swindling your own fiancé. Serves you right if your genitals The final words never escaped her lips. Given the current trajectory, getting screwed over seemed inevitable. If she cursed him now, what would she have left to use later? Gazing into the mirror, like surface of the lake, she saw her reflection, her light green almond-shaped eyes blinking. Who was this breathtaking elven queen? Suddenly, a huge pile of resources appeared out of thin air above her head, crashing down and burying Eve underneath. From the pit, Eve cursed, "Just wait, damn Charles. I'll screw you over eventually." But as she emerged and took in the abundance of resources, Eve had an epiphany. Why struggle? My fiancé is invincible, she mumbled to herself. Damn, even the resources not directly tied to his rank are so plentiful. How advanced must his territory be? Has he ascended? The next moment, a system announcement was broadcasted across the continent of Overlord. Our congratulations to ID1 of the Silent Forest for being the first to ascend to Silver Tier Overlord. As a reward, the quantity and quality of the region's minerals will be doubled! Eve was dumbfounded. She looked down at her body. If we get intimate, can my body withstand the impact of a silver tier? Eve chuckled bitterly. Am I going to be screwed to death by this guy? I better work on getting stronger, otherwise, I might become the first elven queen in history to be fucked to death by a big dick. 3. On the other side, Charles, having gathered enough resources, has already evolved his Heart of the Overlord, which is the Zerg hive, to the silver level. In the process, both Charles and Catherine had broken through to the second tier. Shilord levels. Silver tier Hakam combat power mid-second tier. Hasa skills Heart of the Swarm, Eye of Data, Dark Spear. Looking at his status panel, Charles nodded in satisfaction. Achieving mid-second tier in one go meant he could probably hold his own against the final boss of the Novus village. He seemed to recall the eerie events of the first night, so Charles remained uncertain about the nature of this strange place. Who else would face 20 non-tiered and 1 mid-first-tier monster on their first night here? One could assert that anyone who chose this place was courting death. "Master, master! I've advanced to the second tier!" came an ecstatic shout from a distance. Catherine, her face alight with joy, rushed over and affectionately nuzzled against Charles's chest. Seizing the opportunity, Charles gave her a quick once-over. Combat power low second tier hair skills. Empress's blade, laying Empress's clone, information network. Aside from her tier advancement, there didn't seem to be any significant changes. With a resigned sigh, Charles ruffled her golden locks and planted a kiss on her forehead. Silly, slave girl, your queen bloodline should naturally be at the second tier. No, produce and queen's clone to mass produce troops. As for you, delve into the arcane system of this world. Let's aim to imbue our Zerg blades with magical attributes, which will elevate our combat prowess to an entirely new level. A's for those. The skill books we have are useless and unnecessary for us. Focus on genetic extraction, combination, and enhancement. To put it bluntly, the Zerg Queen was not a combat unit, but a research unit. Now that both had broken into the second tier, a myriad of new possibilities had opened up. Catherine had initially hoped for a passionate sexual intercourse with her master, but felt a twinge of disappointment. However, she quickly rekindled her determination. Her master was preparing for their future, and once everything stabilized, she was determined to serve him well. Nodding decisively, Catherine swiftly returned to the Zerg hive. Her task was to capture monsters imbued with elemental magic for genetic extraction, followed by the laborious process of countless combinations. As dawn broke, Charles, who had been on high alert, finally had a chance to close his eyes and rest. Charles, Eve, wake me up when it gets dark. I'm going to take a nap. Eve, yes, Daddy. Understood, Daddy. The following morning, Charles remained in a deep slumber. However, the Zerg army he had previously created was already tirelessly at work. The worker bees, with unwavering diligence, were continuously extracting resources from the surrounding area and hunting down any wandering monsters. The worms were intensifying their efforts to quickly construct the Zerg nest, and within a day, they would have built a hive large enough to house all the Zerg units. While Charles slept, Catherine, on the other hand, did not rest. Instead, she utilized her queen's avatar to hatch several Zerglings. As the exploration progressed, she found that the workload for the worker bees was becoming overwhelming. Therefore, she decided to delegate the tasks of hunting and gathering to 2 different types of units. As for her main body, she was engrossed in researching 2 distinct projects. One was extracting the genes of the previously exterminated 5 venomous toads to re-sequence a poisonous Zerg gene, aiming to create an effective AoE Zerg unit. The other was researching the issue of magical adhesion. Solving this problem would allow both her and her master to ascend to the next tier. Catherine was far from being just a pretty face. Even before entering the continent of Overlord and being sold into the black market, She had been a highly intelligent beauty and a top student. Of course, back then, she hadn't been as desirous of sexual experiences, merely repressed. Being sent to Charles as a birthday gift was purely the awakening of her true nature. Let's prioritize the sequencing of the poisonous Zerg. This is merely a matter of permutation and combination. Once the master wakes up, he can see the results, she thought. As for the matter of mastering magical energy, Catherine estimated that it would take her a few more days to fully conquer its complexities. In the realm of the overlords, daylight lasted a mere 6 hours, rendering exploration time relatively scarce. However, this limitation certainly did not apply to Charles, the Zerg overlord. Unlike others, who raced against the 6-hour clock to grow stronger, Charles would simply sleep through it, waking up at night to unleash his forces against the dark creatures. 6 hours later, Eve called him to wake up right on schedule. Eve, hey, sleepyhead, time to get up. Though I still don't understand why you only wake up at night. But given his prowess, Eve, a bronze-tier overlord, wasn't foolish. She even speculated that Charles might be reversing the natural order and hunting at night. Reacting to the parchment's message, Charles slowly awoke from his sleep and smiled at Eve's reminder. Charles, thank you, future Queen Eve. After bidding goodnight, he rose from his nest and headed outside. He intended to survey his territory, especially since, within a kilometer radius, there were no longer any monsters to disturb him. The Zerg had completely absorbed all available genetic material and nutrients from the area. However, as soon as he stepped out, he stood there, bewildered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Where did my vast forest go? Why is it now stripped bare? In the end, Charles noticed the worker bees industriously gathering resources right at his doorstep, like diligent honeybees. Charles muttered to himself as he rubbed his forehead, realizing he should have anticipated this. Zerg, as a biological weapon, mostly lacked intelligence. Without explicit instructions, it was difficult for them to act ideally. Fortunately, he possessed the heart of the swarm, a divine skill. In an instant, all the worker bees ceased their current tasks and flew off to distant locations. Charles had issued a command for them to go to areas where wild monsters still existed to harvest resources, simultaneously providing some nutrition for the primary hive mat. After dealing with the home-wrecking incident, Charles opened all the treasure chests in his Eye of Data and listed all the items he couldn't use at the trading center to exchange for resources. Suddenly, Charles let out a surprised exclamation, Zerglings, and 30 of them at that. Catherine managed to create these war machines while I was asleep. Combat Strength Tier 1, mid-level, Skills Rapid Assault, Venomous Bite not bad, the combat prowess is quite impressive. They can single-handedly take on a dark gorilla without much trouble. Taking advantage of this lull, he took the opportunity to consolidate the data on the Zerg units currently under his command. From his arrival on the continent of Overlord to the present, in just 2 days, Charles has under his command 300 worker bees, 30 Zerglings, 2 blade bugs, and 20 worms. From non-tier units to Tier 2 mid-level, he had a decent stockpile. It should be enough to clear out the early-stage darkness. Finally, Charles decided to check on Catherine's research progress. Magic was something not recorded in the Zerg database, making it a challenging subject to study. A slight smirk appeared on his lips as he imagined the disappointed look on his clumsy slave girl's face. Time for the master to offer some comforting. The Zerg Queen's workstation was located within the main hive, and Charles quickly arrived there, slightly taken aback by the sight of a grotesque giant insect. This was the Zerg Queen's insect form, a bloated killing machine. Charles rolled his eyes and chose to head directly to Catherine. No wonder she was unwilling to transform into her Zerg form. Hi. My dear master, you're awake. Catherine, having just finished her work, saw Charles and excitedly wrapped her arms around his, affectionately rubbing her cheek against him. Charles lovingly patted her head and softly said, You've worked hard on your research. Judging by your excited look, do you have some results to share? Catherine nodded enthusiastically. Yes, master. After a day's work, I've developed a Zerg unit capable of large-scale poison attacks. The toxic banling. Hearing the name, Charles recalled a unit in the gene pool known as the banling. Could she have drawn inspiration from that? He nodded with keen interest. Let's hear it. Catherine, upon hearing his request, began to explain slowly. This toxic baneling is a combination of the known baneling from the database and the toxicity of the 5 venomous toad. Moreover, I have added a stabilizing gene sequence. In terms of functionality, it can serve as a ranged poison spitting unit or as a high explosive melee suicide unit, a special kind of troop. Master, let me create one for you to see the effect. Charles nodded in anticipation. Based on her description, this unit could indeed serve as a trump card. Now it just depended on the specific stats. It wasn't long before Catherine programmed a toxic baneling. It was a hideous green insect, less than a meter in size, with a large poison sac on its back. Clearly a lethal beast. Charles scanned it with his eye of data and was somewhat shocked. Species toxic baneling, combat strength tier 1, mid-level, hunt skills toxic explosion, venom spit. The data for the toxic explosion was impressive. Although it was a tier 1, mid-level Zerg explosive skill, it could severely injure a tier 2,
low-level enemy.
Moreover, the most outrageous part was, if this skill killed an enemy unit, that area would become a new source of the virus, causing another explosion. The poison and damage of the subsequent explosion would be halved, and this process could theoretically continue. In essence, Catherine had created a monstrous unit. However, there was one crucial issue. Charles's tone grew serious. This thing won't distinguish between friend and foe, will it? Regrettably, Catherine nodded with a wry smile. Yes, if it uses toxic explosion, it won't discriminate between enemies and allies. However, our Zerg warriors have some level of resistance to poison, so as long as they aren't directly hit, they shouldn't be killed by friendly fire. But that only meant they wouldn't be killed outright. The potent toxins on these toxic banelings would undoubtedly impact the battlefield. Thus, these units could only be used as a last resort, primarily serving as long-range venom-spitting units most of the time. Charles, satisfied, asked, "How many of these can you program?" 30. Catherine replied with a precise number, which only solidified Charles's preparations for what he was about to say next. "Catherine, I have a decision I need to discuss with you," Charles said with a composed expression. Catherine was momentarily stunned, but then responded with a serious look. "Master, your command is everything. I am willing to accept it." And after all, she was the first to achieve recognized loyalty. Discarding those trivial thoughts, Charles turned away and pointed toward the dark sky. The native monsters during the day can be cleared by units like the Zerglings and worker bees. So, I plan to reverse our schedule compared to those other lords. Rest during the day, and at night, we kill and plunder, rapidly sustaining war through war. The parchment had warned never venture out into the night. The current dark creatures are far beyond what the present overlords can handle. However, Charles was different. He now commanded a formidable Zerg army, each unit boasting no less than a first-tier ranking. For a mere night exploration, this force was more than adequate. Upon hearing that they would be heading out into the night, Catherine agreed without a trace of fear. "Master, let me first produce a few toxic banelings to accompany us on our exploration. I think that would make our venture a bit safer." These 2 days of exploration had given her a fair understanding of this world, and she wholeheartedly supported her master's ambitious drive for rapid strength. Charles nodded approvingly. While she went to program the toxic banelings, he casually skimmed through the parchment. It was now the 3rd nightfall, and no special monster siege was expected, making the chat channel particularly lively. "HAN-ID 6458A. After 2 days of hard work, one of my minions has broken through to the lower tier of the 1st rank! D4368?
What? Bro, you must have had some lucky break!
My kobolds are still stuck at 0 rank. To reach the 1st rank, I reckon I need to explore resources for a few more days. HAN-ID 189. I wonder what Big Boss No One is up to now. We all have the same 6 hours of exploration time, so why is he so ahead? The first silver overlord in the entire server, definitely a 2nd-tier powerhouse! Hishin Eve. Kauf. Rumor has it that Big Boss No One sleeps during the day and wakes up at night, so he can ID 4067. Impossible! Absolutely impossible! The parchment clearly states that going out at night is forbidden. P. Charles chuckled and shook his head as he read the comments. Is it possible that the prohibition against night outings is merely part of the newbie protection phase on the continent of Overlord? During the day, Overlords explore resources and hunt those monsters that respond passively. At night, they fend off dark invasions, dealing with challenges reactively. This mode only applies in the early stages of the Overlord continent. Later on, both dark creatures and the divine races will be in a state of rampant chaos. The true era of turmoil has yet to come. Shen ID 1. The prohibition mentioned on the parchment is directed at overlords who have yet to form a substantial army. If you possess a legion of several hundred first-tier and a few second-tier minions, you can explore parts of the darkness. 1 I deem, alright, educational session over. I'm off to hunt. After subtly showing off, Charles exchanged a few more flirtatious remarks with Eve before stepping back into the darkness. This time, Charles brought along 2 blade bugs, 10 toxic banelings, and 20 zerglings. The duo, accompanied by their Zerg squad, set out lightly equipped to avoid a potential total wipeout should they encounter any unknown dark entities. After all, this place was indeed bizarre. Master, is our objective still to clear out the nearby dark creatures? Catherine asked, her tone light and cheerful as she extended her queen's blades. Charles nodded as he walked. Yes, the main goal is to eliminate dark creatures to enhance our Zerg forces with high-end combat units and enrich our genetic database. Additionally, I plan to map out this area. In the days to come, we will lead our Zerg army to annihilate all the dark creatures here. Terrain intelligence is crucial. For instance, Zerglings might not be suitable for flat terrain, but could be highly effective in more chaotic landscapes. The importance of terrain cannot be overstated. Catherine nodded thoughtfully, her eyes filled with admiration for Charles. He was brave and wise, always handling matters with a cool head. Externally, he was a strong yet gentle leader, and in bed, he was a dominant and powerful lover. Catherine felt she could spend her entire life under his dominion, willing to give up everything for him. As they reached the dark river, it was noticeably quieter. Even the flocks of 4-eyed crows feasting on carrion and insects were no longer preyed upon by the 5 venomous toad. Observing the almost whirlwind-like flocks of crows, Charles raised an eyebrow and directed a toxic baneling to attack. A jet of deep green venom shot towards the crows with incredible speed, bridging the gap in levels, resulting in several crows succumbing to the toxic spray. Charles estimated that if these long-range units were used for ranged attacks, 50 toxic banelings spitting venom could create a toxic curtain, effectively dealing with most monster groups below the second tier. So this is the origin of area of effect attacks. The death of a few 4-eyed crows seemed to draw the attention of the entire flock, their gaze filled with malice as they fixated on Charles and his companions below. Quantity over quality, without a doubt. Charles merely smiled at the sight. Using his heart of the swarm, he directed the toxic baneling to perform a toxic explosion, seizing the opportunity to test out the new unit. The toxic baneling let out a fierce roar, and the toxin sacs on its back began to glow with a green luminescence. It then unfurled its wings at an extraordinary speed and darted into the flock of crows. A blast of bright green toxin erupted, filling the sky with a noxious gas. As the mid-tier first, rank 4-eyed crow, initially targeted, was blown to pieces by the toxin explosion, its fragmented flesh carried an abundance of toxic explosion factors. These factors, when splattered onto other crows, triggered secondary, tertiary, and even quaternary explosions. Just a single toxic baneling's power wiped out a flock of several hundred non-tiered and a few first-tier bird-like monsters. And all of this happened in less than half a minute. Charles watched in astonishment as the green remains rained down from the sky. He reached out and caught the head of a 4-eyed crow. The green toxic explosion factors began to spread onto him, but were instantly neutralized by his overlord physique. It must be said, the true potential and power of the toxic baneling are fully realized only when all surrounding units are enemies. A mid-tier first-rank toxic baneling easily obliterated several hundred non-tiered 4-eyed crows. This was simply because their highest rank was non-tiered. Even if their average rank were mid-tier first rank, Charles believed the outcome would not change. The Eye of Data began to process the situation, and hundreds of bronze and silver chests were added to his inventory. A considerable haul. He pulled Catherine into his arms and gave her a passionate kiss, praising her. "My silly slave girl, it seems you're truly not cut out to be a combat unit. Look at how many surprises you've given me these days." The blade bugs are already impressive on their own, theoretically. With sufficiently advanced materials, they could be fashioned into entities similar to Zerg heroes. As long as the genetic material is ample, Charles wouldn't be taken aback if Catherine managed to program something akin to a Suhu-like creature. 2. When it comes to the toxic banelings, their impact has been nothing short of explosive. The sheer terror induced by such a biochemical weapon, coupled with the fact that it can still be mass-produced, is absolutely mind-boggling. Catherine, somewhat lost in the kiss, couldn't help but reach for her master's dick. Hearing his praise, she blushed. "It's all because you gave me this opportunity, master. I was a top science student back in school. These things are like math, requiring massive calculations. Now that I'm a Zerg queen, I can research and develop such war machines." After a moment of tenderness, they prepared to move on. In this tranquil forest, the dark river was merely a small branch. Their journey was still long. They encountered countless dark creatures along the way. First, tier creatures became the norm, which Catherine and the Zerg minions handled. When a second-tier creature appeared, Charles personally took it down. In just a few short hours, their gains far exceeded what an average person would collect from a month's worth of daytime exploration, and this was merely the tip of the iceberg in the night. "Master, do you think once we Zerg conquer this place, we could have some wild fun here?" Catherine couldn't help but laugh as she eyed a uniquely shaped, lounge chair-like tree. This tree seemed to be just the right height for her to bend over and rest on, while her master thrust vigorously from behind. The wild setting might even bring back the thrill she almost felt when she was nearly fucked to death in the training room back in the real world. Charles was about to make a playful remark, but his expression changed upon seeing the tree's shape. He immediately signaled for them to stop and directed Catherine and the Zerg minions to move into the shadows. Catherine said nothing, merely watching to see what her master intended to do. Charles, without uttering a word, retrieved a fire starter from his system space and tossed it over. In no time, a group of scantily clad, terrifying serpent men appeared, frantically extinguishing the light. They were Dark Serpent Men, combat power, Tier 1 superior, Huss skills, Serpent Kiss, Death Constriction, Archery specialization, hard description. One of the most depraved races in the Overlord's world. P1 as Charles observed the serpentine beings swaying their snake-like hips, his eyes were filled with a tangle of emotions. In his previous life, he had been a golden tier serpent overlord, so he was quite familiar with the dark serpents. He knew all too well that, aside from the legendary succubi, no dark race was as depraved as the dark serpents, who went so far as to research and develop training devices to satisfy their carnal desires. Indeed, that reclining tree over there was nothing more than a training platform, albeit one without the sadistic tools attached. The most crucial aspect was that it was, unbelievably, intended for non-serpent races. Typically, the dark serpents would place their specialized training equipment within their own dark territories. There was only one scenario in which such an apparatus would be found outside, and that was if the Dark Serpent Queen was in search of a mate. The mate would be the one subjected to the training platform tied to the tree. The Dark Serpent Queen would relentlessly violate the target here until the essence extracted was sufficient for her to conceive. Only then would she allow the mate to die, drained of their essence. In other words, when such a contraption was placed outside, it signified the presence of a queen within the Dark Serpent tribe. Charles stroked his smooth chin. Just a few days ago, he had acquired the synthesis formula for the Zerg hero, Medusa, and now he had encountered these crucial dark serpents. What did they say? "Fortune favors the bold," one he murmured to himself. "I just hope this serpent queen has royal blood. If not, I'll need to find some resources to help her ascend." The Medusa formula required 2 drops of dark essence, a royal dark serpent queen, and the blood of the overlord. He already had the auxiliary materials. He could only hope this queen had royal blood. One Catherine, noticing the group of dark serpents roaming around, whispered to Charles, "Master, these serpents aren't very strong. Should we take them all out?" To be honest, she had her eye on that reclining tree. Just imagine, lying on that thing, getting her ass up and fucked. Not only would she feel good, but the master would too, right? Moreover, judging by the reactions of those serpent women, it was clearly their prized possession. To get her hands on it, they'd need to kill them all. Hearing this, Charles waited for a moment without taking immediate action. Be patient. Let's wait a few more hours. Just a bit longer. Only a few hours remained until the parchments indicated daylight. By then, they just needed to spot the Serpent Queen. If she wasn't too powerful, Charles would lead the Zerg squad to slaughter everyone here and forcibly capture the Serpent Queen. If she was as formidable as he remembered from his past life, he'd wait until daylight to take them all out in one fell swoop. Yes, the reason dark creatures avoided hunting during the day was that the continent of the Overlord severely suppressed their powers in daylight. The stronger they were, the harsher the suppression. As for the Serpent Queen, despite the fact that these serpent people were only around Tier 1 superior, Charles knew that a royal-blooded dark serpent queen started at Tier 2, and an imperial-blooded one could even start at Tier 3. This obsession with bloodlines was just too absurd. The two of them crouched like Voldemort, waiting for 3 whole hours, witnessing the depravity of the dark serpents. It was truly an all-female orgy. Various outrageous sexual positions and training techniques left Charles' penis hard, and Catherine was parched, yearning for her master to use all those torturous methods on her at once. There was no denying it. This race knew how to play! Finally, the mad erotic display came to an end as their queen grew dissatisfied. A serpent woman with a purple tail and exotic attire slowly made her way forward. Her face was so perfectly sculpted it seemed to be the work of the heavens, exuding an air of icy elegance and nobility. She was the queen of this dark serpent tribe, Medusa Queen. Charles gazed at this stunning serpent beauty, nearly losing himself in her eyes. He was so entranced that he almost got noticed by the powerful queen. Hard combat power. Tier 3 intermediate, Hod skills 1000 Serpent's Heart, eating Serpent Emperor's Shadow, Serpent's Kiss Pact, and background. The youngest princess of the Serpent Empire's Empress. Disliked and exiled to the Silent Forest after falling into darkness, she bides her time, plotting to overthrow the Serpent Emperor.
Edem!
This dark Serpent Queen has the bloodline of the Serpent Emperor and is connected to the Serpent Empire. Charles felt a bit of a headache coming on. If it were a disgraced royal bloodline Serpent Queen, it wouldn't be so bad. Those are usually the offspring of promiscuous serpent overlords with no real background. But this one. Alright, this might be his best opportunity to conquer this beautiful serpent. Biding her time, plotting to overthrow the Serpent Emperor. She's one ruthless serpent! Medusa sniffed the air lightly and detected traces of an intruder. She had a rough idea of their location. A male, but likely much weaker than herself. A look of disdain flickered in Medusa's eyes. Probably some dark creature daring to spy on her territory. Once it saw her, it would be waiting to be slaughtered. She had no desire to feed at the moment, so she decided to spare the intruder's life for now. Medusa cast her gaze over the scene of debauchery, eyes filled with contempt. Such filthy bloodlines, only capable of indulging in their own depravity here. Suddenly, Medusa touched her abdomen. The deep pain brought a look of boundless hatred to her beautiful face. These were the curses planted by her elder sister, causing her to become this tainted dark serpent. Hiss, hiss, hiss! So, Your Majesty, would you like to join us?
We can make you feel heavenly!
One of the serpents nearby, seeing their queen exude a lustful aura, assumed it meant she wanted to join in the orgy. Little did they know, this was the very source of Medusa's pain and hatred. How dare such filthy blood come near me? Medusa roared, her body glowing with a purple aura, instantly killing several nearby dark serpents. A queen must not be insulted. Even if she sought a royal consort to release her lust, she was a pure queen loyal to one mate, not a lowly creature like these dark serpents who would spread their legs
for anyone at any time!
The surrounding serpents looked on in terror, unable to comprehend why their queen would kill them. They believed that endless pleasure was the path to advancing their cultivation. Medusa's predicament was indeed this. She scorned the idea of mating with her subjects, and it was difficult to find a worthy consort in the current darkness. Moreover, her scheming sister had planted spies among the dark serpents to monitor her. Soon, she feared, she would succumb to the lust poison and become a debauched queen, available to all. Sometimes Medusa wondered if someone should just come and wipe out these foolish subjects. Only then could she regain her freedom and find a way to remove the lust poison. Finally, She could bide her time, waiting for the right moment to kill the serpent empress. Take her place! Lust poison handling it myself is futile. I need to find a royal consort to relieve my lust. Medusa looked at the reclining tree and felt a desire to punish a male. Medusa sniffed the air again, a bit surprised. She had thought that revealing her presence would scare him off quickly. Unexpectedly, he merely concealed his aura but continued observing him, and he had a small group with him. Suddenly, her eyes lit up slightly. Through her serpent emperor's senses, she realized that he might be strong enough to easily kill her watchers. So, the serpent queen decided to put on a show. Oh no! It hurts so much, my power has dropped to tier 2 intermediate. If a strong male dark creature finds me, the queen, will become his tool for release and be ruined. 2. Damn it! My pure and untouched body, never touched by another, will be taken by someone else. In the shadows, Charles watched the distant queen's antics and shook his head, finding it all too fake. He glanced at the parchment. There was about an hour left until dawn. He couldn't believe they had been squatting here for over 10 hours. Medusa continued her act, but soon realized he wasn't falling for it at all. She bit her silver teeth tightly, feeling a bit frustrated. Damn it, isn't he a pervert? Isn't he coveting my beauty and wants to fuck me? I've put myself out there, and you still won't come and fuck me. After waiting like this, they finally reached the break of dawn. Medusa's expression changed. When she was still part of the serpent royalty, her strength was unaffected by light. However, after becoming a dark creature, she hadn't yet adjusted to her new sensitivity to light. As daylight finally broke, she realized her power had dropped to tier 2 intermediate. Her eyebrows twitched. She had a bad feeling about this. At that moment, Charles launched his attack. Countless tier 1 intermediate zerglings moved like phantoms, slaughtering the exhausted dark serpents who were too drained from their orgy to fight back. Simultaneously, a massive wave of green venom surged toward Medusa, forming a toxic orb with power equivalent to a tier 2 low-level venom attack. How bold! Medusa's eyes flashed with a hint of relief. With a swift motion, she deflected the venomous orb, which conveniently exploded at the center of the dark serpents. Charles, stepping out from the shadows, was stunned by this maneuver. He asked in surprise, "Are you sure that wasn't on purpose? How could a queen of the serpent royalty make such a rookie mistake?" This maneuver of using the enemy's weapon to kill her own followers was masterfully executed. Seeing the dark serpent's hatred for her dissolve into silence, Medusa's lips curled into a slight smile. As the toxic banlings and zerglings finished off her subordinates, she couldn't help but grin widely. Finally, she thought, it's over. Those bastards had it coming. If she hadn't suspected they possessed some secret communication method given by the Empress, she would have dealt with them herself long ago. Looking at Charles's handsome face, Medusa felt a warm sensation in her belly. He was undeniably a male specimen that fit her taste perfectly. Tier 2 intermediate combat power, those bizarre war machines. This guy could not only be her king consort, but also provide strategic advantages. It was only then that Medusa understood why he had chosen to attack during the day. Turns out, this guy was an overlord. She looked at him appreciatively and said, I admire your ambition, wanting to tame an overlord like myself. But don't think that just because my power has dropped to tier 2 intermediate, I am now easy pickings. This matter will be settled after the battle. I understand your intentions, so here's my proposal, a private duel. If you win, I will become your personal slave, fulfilling all your desires. If I win, you will become my king consort. Charles opened his mouth, unsure whether to praise this serpent woman for her sensibility or criticize her for being too procedural. But everything she said was spot on. He had come here specifically to transform this serpent queen into a Zerg hero unit. As for her mention of fulfilling desires, Charles didn't deny it. Perhaps there was a unique thrill in conquering such a beautiful serpent woman. Both of them were overlords and queens in their own domains, so it was only natural that the victor would dominate. 3. It was fair and just, and also straightforward. Charles looked serious as he said, Queen, what others have said is true, but I want more than just making you my slave. I intend to transform your bloodline to become a Zerg hero under my command. Medusa shrugged indifferently and mocked. If I'm not strong enough, then even if you fuck me to death, It would be my own lack of skill. Transforming my bloodline is fine with me, as long as it makes me stronger. Huh? I don't believe a newly Tier 2 intermediate overlord like you can defeat me. That tree full of training tools over there will be the instruments I'll use on you. Ha ha ha. With everything clear, both of them showed murderous intent, each aiming for a decisive strike. Charles sprouted insect wings from his back and wielded a dark insect spear, a weapon he mastered at Tier 2. In a flash, the spear's tip was at Medusa's throat. The next second, Medusa's lips curled into a slight smile as she shattered into countless purple serpents, binding Charles tightly. The serpents wrapped around him like nimble ropes, using intricate techniques to immobilize him. It seemed Medusa intended to personally enjoy this exceptionally handsome man. You lost, my king consort. May I now know your name? Medusa flickered and appeared in front of the thousand serpents' heart, eating formation, eager to open it and indulge in the ultimate physical pleasure with Charles in her lair. When she opened it, she found that there was no one inside! Medusa's expression froze slightly. She quickly moved away from her original position, but a formidable black spear pierced through her shoulder. Charles, wielding the insect spear and flapping his insect wings, looked at the furious serpent beauty with a calm expression. Your thousand serpents' heart eating formation requires the opponent to touch it as a medium. If they don't, the contraction speed slows down. Even Catherine can dodge at that speed. Medusa frowned. How did he know so much about serpent techniques? But she hadn't lost yet. Admitting defeat now would be premature. Medusa craved to be conquered, to be possessed and ravished by a powerful male. However, as the future queen of the serpent people, she couldn't just kneel and submit at the first sign of defeat. Come again, my king consort. You've piqued my excitement. But Charles shook his head and returned to Catherine's side, dispelling the thousand serpents' heart, eating formation under her feet. He spoke calmly. No, my queen slave, you have already lost. Medusa's eyes filled with rage as she shouted.
How dare you!
A massive purple python, dozens of meters long, emerged. This was her serpent emperor's shadow, the most powerful bloodline ability of the serpent royalty. The enormous serpent head slowly approached Charles, its blue, tinged eyes full of mockery. My slave king consort, if you agree to marry me, I will spare the females and subordinates you care about. If not, I will eat them. Kneel and accept my serpent kiss, receive the grace of my venom, and you will share a millennium-long empire with me. Medusa had thought he would be terrified, that he would kneel to protect his woman and accept her contract kiss. But to her surprise, he showed no fear. Such a fine male, she was even more eager to fuck him. Charles merely smiled in response. Extend your serpent kiss and seal the contract. The enormous serpent head nodded in satisfaction, its eyes growing more lustful. It seemed he knew he was no match and was willing to become her king consort. However, she glanced coldly at Catherine. That woman could not be allowed to live! As a virgin serpent, she required her king consort to be devoted solely to her. The only acceptable solution was to devour the original consort herself. While she thought about devouring Catherine, her body honestly offered its highest contract. The serpent kiss. The serpent kiss was the highest contract among the serpent people, one even the serpent empress couldn't break. What have you done? Medusa's face filled with horror as she realized she had unintentionally transformed the original equal contract into a supreme contract, making her a slave and the other the master. Once signed, her life would belong to him? Unfortunately, no matter how much the massive purple python struggled, it could not overcome the betrayal of its body and soul. Medusa began to panic. She was destined to become the empress of the serpent people. If she became someone else's slave here, how could she ever achieve her goal of usurping the throne? Desperately, she pleaded, No. I only wanted to form an equal contract with you. We are supposed to be true partners. You can't do this to me! In response, Charles's voice was cold and cutting. But you harbored murderous intent towards my foolish slave. If it weren't for your usefulness to me, do you think I would allow you to live? If this serpent woman hadn't plotted against Catherine, he might have agreed to the equal contract. After all, having a beautiful serpent woman as a partner wouldn't have been bad. But the moment she showed killing intent towards Catherine, Medusa's status was reduced to that of a mere beautiful serpent slave. Yes, her status would be the same as Catherine's. Medusa was speechless. She desired pure love and couldn't tolerate sharing her husband with others. If you want me to be your slave, fine. Just be prepared to face the wrath of the Serpent Empire's royal family. I am of the royal bloodline of the Serpent Empire in the Wildlands, the current Serpent Emperor's sister. Medusa's eyes widened in horror as she realized her true name was being inscribed in the slave's position on the contract. As soon as he filled in his own name, she would be bound to him as a slave for life. In the end, Charles modified the contract's duration from permanent to 50 years and completed the contract. Thus, the Dark Serpent Queen was utterly subdued. On the way, Medusa followed Charles with a look of annoyance on her face, with another female slave sister beside her persuading herself. Well, Queen Medusa, being a master's female slave is really good. Not only can you enjoy the master's all-round play for 2 hours every day, but you can also drink the master's semen every day. How dare they be so lewd? Medusa was furious, but because of Charles' attitude earlier, she didn't dare to get angry with Catherine beside her. This led to the poison of desire in her belly becoming more and more intense, the most primitive desire constantly breaking through the psychological defenses of Queen. When she heard about the 2 hours of play every day, her purple eyes showed a hint of desire, and then quickly retreated. Damn it, am I really going to fall into a shameless and lewd serpent queen? Seeing this new beautiful serpent slave ignore her, Catherine was not angry, because she knew in her heart that when things settled down, it was their fate to please the master with their own lascivious bodies. So, it's more like a pure bed companion relationship. In that case, why bother paying attention to anyone else? In the end, everyone would be lying on the bed covered in semen. Charles smiled when he heard Catherine's words from behind, raising his opinion of this serpent queen. Adaptable, understanding. Finally, under Catherine's attack, Medusa surrendered. She rubbed Catherine's head helplessly. Okay, Catherine, you don't need to say any more. Since I lost and signed the master's slave contract, I have nothing to say. It's just that I used to be the serpent queen, so I need some time to adapt to the difference of becoming a slave, right? Being fucked instead of fucking, and being fucked without any dignity. This made a certain serpent queen's mentality a bit broken. Catherine's lips curled slightly at the words, understanding that the other party was gradually changing her mindset, and all that was needed was for the master to deflower her to make her realize her identity. After speaking, Medusa hesitantly approached Charles, her jade-like hand playfully poking his waist. Master, I have a question I want to ask you. Charles stopped at the words, smiling as he said, Is it because you're still unclear about how you lost? Medusa nodded wryly. After all, she had even used her ultimate move, the Serpent Emperor's Shadow, and still couldn't understand how Charles had made her submit. But then she realized, this was also a trump card, so how could he reveal it? Charles nodded at her words, speaking casually, because, as you unraveled the thousand serpent's heart, eating formation, I had attached my blood of the Overlord to the dark insect spear. The blood of the Zerg is inherently dominant. Your serpent bloodline is not as high as mine. The difference between the two is so great that even if the Serpent Emperor were present, the gap could not be bridged. When a high-level bloodline merges with a lower, level one, it will result in a bloodline curse similar to that of the Dragon clan. Medusa wasn't stupid, and at this point, she roughly understood what he meant. In essence, although she might have been slightly inferior in combat power, the strength of her bloodline was already at a level where it could forcibly alter flesh and soul. Therefore, as the superior at the time, Charles could freely issue commands to Medusa that she could not refuse. In other words, her serpent bloodline was too weak. Although Medusa was a bit frustrated, if she was more excited. If she continued on her original serpent path, perhaps no one could go further than her elder sister, the Serpent Emperor. Initially, she had only held on with a single belief. One now, with her bloodline evolving. Would she really have a chance to defeat the Serpent Emperor completely at the peak of her power and make that proud serpent face lick her heels?
Medusa shuddered, feeling aroused.
So she asked in confusion, Master, why do I feel that my body is even more lascivious than before? Is it because the bloodline modification is incomplete? To this, Charles evilly smiled. Cherish the current you, for when we return to the nest, I will completely transform you into a Zerg hero. Since you are my released slave, I will instruct Catherine to add some of my pheromones during the biological transformation. Fit. From now on, you will be an exclusive flesh vessel that turns into a wanton and lecherous slut at the sight of my penis. As it turned out, Medusa's pretty face blushed slightly, without commenting on whether her master was good or bad, or showing any signs of rising up to kill anyone. In fact, even if he hadn't done this little act, she would have incorporated her king's essence into her bloodline. From now on, she could only have feelings for Charles. Pouting, Medusa said, "Master, could you enlarge my breasts a bit and make them a little more lascivious? I've been feeling frustrated about this for a long time. It'll be more exciting when we indulge together." With a natural inclination towards sensuality, she had no shame in matters of love between men and women. She had only refrained from indulging in darkness before because she had strived to prepare to be a future ruler and didn't want to fall into debauchery. Well, that serpent emperor's bitch. Medusa seemed to remember something and smirked. "Master, you better hurry up and develop. When you reach the 9th tier, I'll make that virgin bitch of the serpent emperor become your plaything. How about us sisters serving you together?" One Charles contentedly patted her head, appreciating her understanding nature. Even before the transformation was complete, she was already thinking of bringing her sister to join in the fun. "What's your relationship with the serpent emperor?" Medusa's eyes narrowed, filled with killing intent as she said, "A relationship that ends in death when we meet. Of course, with the master, it's a relationship of sex-slave sisters. I am the elder sister." In the Zerg hive, Catherine, dressed in a white coat, led Charles into the operating room. The Zerg hive queen could only program units, not Zerg heroes, so this time she was the assistant. Watching Medusa sleeping on the cold operating table, Charles took out the dark essence and a drop of the blood of the Overlord, then began the fusion using the power of the Overlord. Seeing this, Catherine asked in surprise, "Master, should we add the lascivious genes to Medusa in advance?" Charles chuckled helplessly at her words. She is a dark serpent, one of the most lecherous species in the continent of Overlord. Adding more genes will turn her into a bitch in heat. But first come and enlarge her slutty breasts a bit. They were too small for a good tit-fucking before. Catherine was taken aback at the words, then pursed her lips and began to change the genetic transformation to a busty attribute before leaving. Upon entering, she realized that she couldn't understand the operation of the Overlord at all. She might as well study the magical properties instead. After about 2 hours, the freshly minted Zerg hero, Medusa Queen, was born. A combat power 3rd rank superior and skills 1,000 insects devouring heart, serpent emperor's shadow, eye of lust, overlord spear pseudo, imperial might pseudo. This was definitely an SSR! Charles was pleasantly surprised, thinking it would just be a synthesis of an ordinary Zerg hero. Who could have expected to encounter the true ruler with the serpent royal bloodline? A fierce serpent who could contend for the throne with the serpent emperor. Medusa slowly opened her eyes, feeling the calmness of the 3rd rank superior power, only showing satisfaction when she saw her large breasts. The bitch of the serpent emperor might not have breasts as large as hers. But when Medusa re-examined her bloodline and skills, she was stunned. What kind of heaven-defying attributes were these? Not only had the poison of debauchery been transformed into a skill called the Eye of Lust, but the once dark and mixed bloodline that had been planted was suddenly even higher than before. Her bloodline was now countless times higher than when she had not fallen into darkness, far surpassing that stinking bitch of the serpent emperor. Overlord. Overlord, could she, the queen, really have this day? She turned her head, solemnly kneeling before him, and using the highest etiquette of the serpent race, she offered the most sincere loyalty to her master who had given her new life. "Master, I am willing to sacrifice myself for you." Even if that bitch of the serpent emperor abdicated in favor of Medusa to become the serpent emperor, she would not hesitate to stay here as Charles's sex slave. Just after she had spoken these words, the Zerg system finally appeared again. Aga detected a female with royal bloodline who is 100% loyal to the host. Growth package distribution. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the
Arms evolution template!
Another 100% loyalty. Charles looked at the tempting female body in front of him with a complicated expression, his gaze softening. After all, with Catherine's precedent, he could more intuitively understand the concept of 100% loyalty. The Serpent Queen, who had been proud for countless years, had truly surrendered to him from the bottom of her heart. As for the growth package from the